we're trying to talk about this very serious story. And so I say it's the KKG sorority, and Terrence immediately says he's never heard of that. He thinks I'm wrong. And then I start trying to explain how you wouldn't want a transgender male in a sorority house because there are women there who are undressing and doing and Karen's laughing at me. I'm just trying to lay out the facts here. So what is going on at the KKG sorority where apparently a transgender male is in this house where I think there's women living there, right?
You are correct in that assessment, Ed. Yes. And I was in a sorority, and I can tell you, you're absolutely right there that no, you do not want a biological male in your space at the sorority house. It is really serious. And ladies at the Kappa Kappa Gamma sorority at the University of Wyoming, they are fighting back. They're actually suing the sorority and its national president for not following its bylaws and actually misleading them by allowing a biological male to join their sorority. So the lawsuit was filed back in March by 7 of these sorority members, and the details in it are actually pretty graphic. They are accusing 21-year-old Artemis Langford, a 6'2", 260-pound man who identifies as female, of being a peeping Tom with a visible erection. The lawsuit originally used a pseudonym for Langford instead of his real name. It's referred to him as Terry Smith. And part of it stated, Mr. Smith has, while watching members enter the sorority house, had an erection visible through his leggings. Other times he has had a pillow in his lap. Now, the complaint goes on to say that Langford is sexually interested in women. They point to his Tinder dating profile as evidence. The ladies allege that he makes inappropriate comments and he has questioned certain sorority members about what their private parts look like and their breast cup size. Langford apparently lives in campus housing, but he visits the sorority house often, and he may move into the house next year. Now, there have been some new developments in this case just within the last few weeks. One of the women has dropped out of the lawsuit, and the judge ordered that the 6 remaining must reveal their names. They had originally requested to do all of this anonymously, and Langford's real name is now used in the official complaint as well. Now, in another interesting twist here, it just so happens that Langford is a legislative intern for the Wyoming Democrats. Here is a tweet from that organization giving him a shout out, thanking him for all of his hard work. So ultimately, guys, the goal here is they want this guy removed from the sorority, and they want to make sure that no other man in the future can be allowed to join this sorority. Now, the lawsuit really could open the floodgates here because there are a lot of other sororities. I did some research in doing this story. There's a lot of other sororities that have actually updated their policies in recent years to include people that identify as women. So a lot of people, experts, are watching this saying this could end up in the Supreme Court. So a lot of eyes will be on how this unfolds in the coming months. We'll keep an eye on it for sure.
Do you believe me now, Karen?
I believed you at the beginning. As ridiculous as the story is, I believed you all along. It was just the way that you approached it, which was funny.
What about the angle of the Wyoming Democrats? It makes me wonder whether this was like an inside job, like, hey, let's get in here.
Let's position this transgender person and
push
create
the
this narrative.
transgender narrative, their agenda, into this sorority, expand the transgender agenda at that campus, but to your point, around the country as well, because you just keep going piece by piece, eventually try to get this to the Supreme Court. It just looks very political and strangely coincidental that this man, because that's what he is actually working for the Wyoming Democrats.
Yeah, and it makes me think of that the person who bakes cakes, right? And they kept going back, even after he had been through years of court cases and had been exonerated. They kept going back, harassing this cake maker, trying to get him to make it. It almost reminds me of that. Like, what is your agenda here? We'll see, because, I mean, maybe he just is involved in politics and he just so happens to work for the Wyoming Democrats, but it does seem awfully strange. And apparently, according to the actual complaint, it's in the details there that he is on the record. Witnesses say he pressures these females. If somebody says something he doesn't like, he automatically uses the transgender shtick, and he goes after them, and he bullies people there behind the scenes. Yeah, it's really odd. I feel for these women. Imagine you can't feel comfortable in your own home, feel like you're being watched. The details I only went into a small fraction of them. The details in this complaint are really graphic.
The details that you mentioned were pretty graphic. I was struck by, just the craziness of all of this. I expected the story to be salacious, but it was over the top.
Did you happen to check this? Because so who actually let him in? Wouldn't the women?
How did that happen?
Wouldn't the women have been part of deciding who gets
process?
in?
Yeah.
And maybe there were some of them pressuring and saying, well, let's let a transgender.
Yeah,
he identifies as a woman, and then this is what happens. But I'm just curious.
Yeah, so that's all detailed in the complaint as well. They say that the pressure ultimately came from the national chapter. That's why the president is being, she's included in this lawsuit. But yes, to your point, the sorority does have to have a majority vote to allow which girls to come in. But now, since this lawsuit was filed, there are girls that have come forward saying that they felt pressure from their leadership to say, hey, if you don't vote this way, you're transphobic, whatever else. So they voted a certain way, but they were uncomfortable with it. And the final point here is that the girls who are in the pledge class with him, they don't have a vote. They're being voted on. So that the ones that are coming through this next batch with him that have to live with him for the next 4 years, they didn't have a say in all of this. And I would imagine a number of those girls are a part of this lawsuit.
That's a great point. Yeah, you think about that because it's the older girls that are voting this man in.
Right. And then the younger ones will have to deal with it in the days ahead. Carolyn, great job as always.